Welcome to the Edge of Casual. I am your host Verso, and today we are going to be looking at the game Software Incorporated. This is a tycoon-style simulation game from Coredumping, and just some disclaimers at front. Software Incorporated, it's an early access game, and it's still in alpha phase. Worse than that, it's one of these single developer titles, like literally one dude working on it, so, make of that what you will and just pray that it gets finished someday. My personal rule is that I won't touch one of these games unless I'm okay with owning it in its current state. And the good news here is that I am okay with owning it, because as it stands now at version 11.7-ish, it's a very decent and very addictive, at least to me, game. And is it perfect? No, it's not, but very solid, and I've already had some very, very late nights with it, so make of that what you will. So I do need to append a note here on software version. The out-of-the-box Steam version is version 10, if I'm not mistaken, and the version is almost 3 years old at this point. The dev has updated quite a number of game mechanics since then, as well as added an entirely new system of hardware manufacturing. But in order to play that version of the game, you need to actually opt into the beta build through Steam. You can do that through the properties menu for the game, and I'd highly advise doing this since that version of the game is perfectly stable and just better overall, but I will offer a modifier to that statement later. So all of that out of the way, the first thing I think is worth noting is that at the default game speed, air quotes around game speed, the in-game day is representative of 1 month in the life of your software company. So profits and expenses are tallied every day after midnight. You'll get your reports of how many units you sold of your various applications, employees come back from their vacations, sick days, educational classes, etc. And the point of me mentioning all of this is to say that I've come to think of Software Incorporated almost as a sort of turn-based game. You get into a rhythm with it where you just kind of stop paying attention to what happens during the actual workday, and you just make a bunch of decisions when your employees go home in the evening, and then more decisions later on when the day turns over. So, what is this game? Well, it's pretty much exactly what it promises to be. I don't think you'll be surprised to discover that you play a software developer. You start in your garage in 1980, most likely, doing unrewarding contract work to pay the bills, and over time you start adding to and skilling up your team until you're ready to begin producing your own titles. I mean, that's one way you can play it. Though there are many competitors to you, I guess, other companies doing the same sort of work that you're doing, the only real threat I've noticed in 20 years of running my company is the threat of bankruptcy, and honestly, that's really barely a threat at all. It isn't particularly challenging at the default difficulty, but, I think that's okay, especially when you're first learning the game. So, what works? Well, a lot of it, if I'm being honest. As I mentioned, it's a simple enough game to master, but because of the turn-based feel of the game loop, I've been strongly experiencing that just one more turn sensation that I've gotten in the past from games like the Civilization series. It's surprisingly very fulfilling to move software products through the development cycle, starting from the design document to the design phase to alpha, then beta, finally release and support, and just handling the very high-level decisions like how much design work do I want to do up front, when do I iterate, when to push it out the door, and then watching the money roll in from there after the delivery of a killer app, watching your company's industry prestige grow as you acquire new fans, more name recognition, adding new dev teams to your company, etc. The growth of your company feels entirely organic, and it may be 10, 15, 20 years really before your company name really starts to mean anything to anybody, but if you make the right choices, adopt the right strategy, you'll eventually be an industry leader, and that's very rewarding when it happens. So, something that I enjoy about this game is that you can pretty much play it however you want right now. If you don't want to get into hardware manufacturing, that's fine. It's really a later game activity anyway, and it's entirely optional. So if you don't feel like hiring a marketing team and micromanaging all that nonsense, that's also fine too. You can work with a publisher who will blanket the market with advertising for a small share of your profits, maybe like 12%, and the right to dictate the release date, and that's pretty much it. In fact, I highly, highly recommend that you do that, because marketing is my least favorite thing to micromanage in a game, and until you're a huge company, there's really no way that you can do it as well as a large publisher can. So your publisher can even help fund your project if you choose that option as well. One thing I would say is that it's very ineffective to go for a broad development strategy, so this is one caveat to the play it your way line. Your company's sales and prestige are contingent upon being known as a leader, I guess, like an industry leader within a certain space, so choose a path that you like business software or games, and just stick with that is what I would advise. The game will forgive you if you change your mind. I mean, I was a bit scattered with my approach at the start. My biggest product in the early years was a piece of software called Ultraprint, but you know what? Sales from Ultraprint financed my entry into the world of video games, and now I'm making big bucks doing that, so it all worked out. So continuing on the theme of playing the way you want, I do need to state there's a lot going on in this game that I haven't even touched, or at least I've barely scratched the surface. So for example, you can purchase shares of other companies and attempt a hostile takeover. You can invest in the stock market, you can set up a digital distribution platform for your products, you can conduct technology research in order to file patents that net you royalty income, and so forth. And if I have any complaints about it, it's only that a lot of that seems completely unnecessary. Like, you don't have to do it at all if you don't want to. You can do it or don't. It doesn't matter. It won't prevent you from becoming a dominant force in the industry, because you can do that through the strength of your software releases alone, just purely through your own development work. So you don't even really need to develop your own products for the matter of that. I mean, you can hire a receptionist at a certain point who will collect assignments for you from other companies, and I'd assume that you could actually play the entire game like that. Honestly, if you simply wanted to run a call center, you could definitely get away with doing that. It's a very interesting subsystem the dev clearly put a lot of thought into. And yet, I didn't even use it at all until I started the game on Impossible and kind of had to. But it's very well thought out. But anyway, what else works well? A pleasant surprise, the build mode is entirely too good for this type of game, surprisingly good. It was almost comparable to playing The Sims or something like that. You could go quite deeply into it, and getting out of the garage into my own building was a major milestone for me. I mean, this really deserves its own video because it's that fully fleshed out, but we'll just leave it there. Let's talk about what could be improved. So the counterpoint to all the improvements that were introduced in Alpha version 11 is that the developers made some pretty odd decisions related to employee competence. And the way things used to work was that employees could do most things, but if they weren't yet skilled in them, they could just do them very badly. And that makes sense, it's very true to life, but with version 11, he introduced a star-based skill system that straight up restricts what employees can do. So that has led to some real frustrations for me personally, as well as some decisions that to me seem almost unintentionally hilarious. So for example, your designated team leader isn't even competent to hold a meeting without 3 stars in the socialization skill. And for the matter of that, you effectively can't promote leaders from within because, as far as I can tell, there literally isn't a way to get them leadership experience unless they already had leadership experience when you hire them. Makes no sense. So similarly, if you get slammed with support requests after releasing a major software product, your programmers aren't competent to file a bug report unless they have skill in support, the support line. So essentially nothing gets fixed. You need to have dedicated support staff, which is fair enough, but you would think a programmer could at least do the basics of filling out a bug report, right? So things like this, it can get a little weird and counterintuitive, definitely. I've got a bunch of quibbles like that, but really in general, that's what they are. They're quibbles. For example, I'd like to be able to pivot during development in order to support newer operating systems or update the dev tools I'm using, add new requirements to the design document, and so forth. It's irritating that once you press the develop button, you can't change anything anymore until your product is ready to go out the door. Also, the relationship between you and your publisher is very lifeless. You'll never hear from them. The only thing that you can do to annoy them is to be late delivering your product, and they don't give you any input into your design along the way. You can't send it to them for review, things like this. I think that if I were going to add anything at this stage, it would really just be the ability to outsource work to other companies. And as mentioned, you can accept work, but those deals only go one direction. They flow toward you. For example, I don't really love managing support for my products, and I would love to be able to contract out my support calls to another company, and they just send me back the bugs to fix, but can't do that. Additionally, there really needs to be a better way to cross-train employees, and I've already mentioned that you can't put employees on a leadership track unless they enter with leadership skills, but similarly, I had the thought that because support staff do some nominal amount of bug fixing as part of their job, that it would be a good entry path for junior devs. But that hasn't panned out at all because they really can't skill up in programming skills effectively in that role. So this is another example of what I consider to be a negative change over Alpha version 10, where you could train anybody in anything, whereas in Alpha version 11, employees have progress bars that fill up through their actual work activities, and only when they have a full progress bar do you have the opportunity to send them out for training. That part actually makes sense, but it's just like the getting them in the door. There needs to be more work put into that. I mean, so that was a cool idea. It's just a problematic execution right now. Most things really about employee management could use another design iteration to be sure. For me, at least, I don't have significant problems with my employees, and they never ever quit. But occasionally they do get a bit stressed, and the game doesn't always make it clear how to resolve issues like that. Not that you really need to, but it would be nice if you could, because they tend to take breaks and not be effective workers and that sort of thing. But for the record, there's an entire employee benefit system available to tweak employee satisfaction, but thus far, I have not felt compelled to use it at all, and it's basically slave labor at my company. I feel a little bit bad about it, and I really feel like interacting with the system of employee benefits should be more of a requirement. Actually, at one point I did have the thought that I could make more efficient use of my space by running an evening shift, so I tried running an evening support shift with bonus evening hour pay, but my employees still hated working nights and they were completely inefficient, so I gave up on that. So more work needs to be done there, I'd say. Anyway, I could discuss the finer details of these game systems all day, but we do have to end it somewhere, and there aren't a lot of eyeballs on this game right now from what I've seen, so honestly, I'd love to discuss it. If you feel like you want to share your thoughts about the game, please feel more than free to leave a comment below. In the meantime, and as always, keep it casual.